and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host. Carbon capture and sequestration technology, which we've talked about on this show and on Earth911 a lot, is a technology that's going to help clean the atmosphere of billions of tons of excess CO2 emitted by humans since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. One of the big challenges with climate change, as we think about how to overcome it, is that even if we reduce CO2 emissions to zero on an annual basis, the excess CO2 left over from the last 170 years will continue to warm the planet for centuries unless it's removed. So today we're talking with Daniel Eggers, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at Climeworks, a Zurich, Switzerland-based leader in carbon capture technology. And Climeworks has launched one of the first commercial carbon capture projects in the world, a geothermal powered project called Orca at Helleschidi, Iceland. Now, CO2 pulled from the atmosphere there is mixed with water and injected into the ground, and there it forms carbonate materials, or minerals, excuse me. And when you turn CO2 to rock, it will stay there literally forever. This is a really permanent form of sequestration. You can support this project by subscribing to monthly sequestration services that range from $8 to $55 a month at climeworks.com/subscriptions. Climeworks also operates 13 other facilities, but Helleschidi is its first one to start to scale up. Welcome to the show, Daniel. How are you?
Hi, Mitch. Thank you for inviting me. I'm doing great. Good to be here.
Now, first, can you explain briefly how this process works? What's behind the steps to bind the CO2 in the atmosphere and then collect it and put it in the ground?
So here we are basically talking about two different processes. Mm-hmm. The first process is to capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, so to capture the carbon dioxide. And the second process step is to store it safely and permanently underground. And capturing the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, we are doing with machines. The core of these machines, it is basically a metal box, and inside this metal box we have a material which is binding the CO2. And there we are simply drawing air through this collector, and then the CO2 builds a weak chemical bonding to this filter material and sticks to this filter material. And this then we can release again by heating this filter material up and then collect it in a highly concentrated form. And this CO2 as a gas, we are then basically mixing with water. So we are building nothing else than a highly concentrated fizzy water. And this water is then pumped underground. And there it starts to react with the underground rock formation.
Now, you mentioned heating in order to free the bound CO2. And one of the criticisms of carbon capture is the energy requirements involved. Now, your Iceland location is sitting on a geothermal energy source. And the question is, how much power is required, and can you source other forms of low carbon power in order to perform this process?
The main power consumption of our process is the heat we are needing for heating up the filter material to release the CO2. In Iceland, we have the very good situation that we can get the waste heat from the geothermal power plant, but it can also be any other heat source. It can be solar heat, it can be waste heat from another process. So, I mean, we at the end of the day, we need to have hot water on a temperature of something around or something above 100 degrees centigrade. The advantage of direct air capture is that you can basically do it everywhere. So you can do it everywhere you have an energy source, a renewable energy source available. So you can also do it in deserts. You can do it in remote areas where you're not in competition with other energy users. And this is important. I mean, this is indeed a big criticism, and people say, wouldn't it be better to use the renewable energy to replace fossils? Of course it is, but with direct air capture, we need to go to locations where we are not competing with these energy demands.
But as you just pointed out, you could co-locate this with a large industrial facility that was throwing off a lot of waste heat, it sounds like. So this is something that can be plugged in all over the existing economy, as well as in these more isolated locations like a desert.
Absolutely. The energy is one thing we need. And the second thing we need is we need to do something with the CO2. Either we need to store it somewhere in a proper way, or we need to turn it into fuels or materials. And this is the second thing we need. So a good location for direct air capture has a lot of renewable energy, point one. And point two, we can use the CO2 for storage or for utilization.
So now you just recently announced a project in Oman, and in the announcement you point out the unique geological character of the location. That's the other big question then, is you need somewhere to put this stuff. Are there a lot of locations around the world that have good geological formation for the injection of the water into the ground? Or is this kind of limited by the fact that there isn't such a thing everywhere?
You cannot do it everywhere. So you need to have a specific geological formation to do that. But these locations are all over the world. We have a storage potential to store many, many times the entire carbon legacy of mankind. So the storage volume is not the bottleneck. We have storage locations in Iceland. We have, as you mentioned, we have it in Oman, we have it in Norway, we have it in the US, we have it in Ethiopia. We have it all over the world, and there is enough space to store the CO2.
Okay, so there's plenty of places to do this. That's now the Helishidi setting is going to store about 4,000 tons of CO2, at least at this time, annually. How big is Oman going to be?
Oman, in the first step, is much smaller. That's a pilot project to make research on this storage facility. So this will be below 50 tons per year, if I'm not mistaken. But also the 4,000 tons in Helishidi, this is not enough. So we need to store millions or even billions of tons of carbon dioxide. So we need to have access to such locations with the storage potential. Mm-hmm. And that's also why it is important to develop new storage site to get the storage potential also available. It's not enough that it's just there. We need to have access to the storage site. So
let's take, for instance, the question of how many locations are needed in order for us to draw down, say, 5% of the anthropogenic CO2 in the atmosphere on an annual basis. It sounds like it might be hundreds of facilities.
It's definitely the case. It's not only the question on how much CO2 you can store this in total. It's also the question how much you can store every year in a locations. And there we're talking about, per storage site, maybe about a couple of million tons per year. Mm-hmm. So the biggest sequestration sites which are in development now in Europe, they have an annual storage potential of maybe 5 million tons per year. Okay. Of course, we can make them bigger, but it's definitely somewhere limited. That also means that we need to develop many of those sites.
So we're also talking about sequestering this in the ground, but the captured CO2 can be used for other things like making fuel or advanced materials. Does Climeworks see providing CO2 as a new raw material for industry as another element of its business?
When we would like to be net zero somewhere in the future, then we are only talking about reducing CO2 emissions. Right. But we do have a lot of need of carbon of products which are based on carbon, mm-hmm. be it fuels, be it materials. And the source for that is carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide needs to come from the air. This is the only unlimited source of carbon we have. Right. And from this perspective, we also need to provide this carbon dioxide for utilization, be it for fuels, be it for materials, be it for chemicals. And this is definitely also an industry which is evolving. We see many projects coming up, mainly driven also by the aviation industry, because aviation is really hard to decarbonize. Mm-hmm. And that's a necessity to have a net zero aviation, that we're producing fuels which are made out of CO2 from the air.
So this idea of mining the air, we've talked about this before many times. The metaphor that I would draw on in order to explain where we're going, not where we are today, but where we're going, is that we will literally have sort of an atmosphere conditioning system in the future. And that circular economy in carbon will be something we're managing on an annual basis in order to stay below net zero, actually pulling cumulatively more CO2 out of the air than we're putting in. Is that an accurate way of thinking about the potential for carbon capture as a systemic component in a circular economy?
That's exactly the path we have to take. We need to create a closed carbon cycle. So we also need to create a recycling system, which we know, for example, for aluminum or glass or paper. The same system we also need to develop for carbon dioxide. And the carbon dioxide in the future will be emitted by small emitters like airplanes or
right.
Mobile devices. And that's why we need to take it back out of the air. And then we need to upgrade it again, to upcycle again to materials and to fuels where we can use again.
So I think this really gets to the nub of one of the major critiques of carbon capture, which is that it provides an excuse for continuing to emit CO2. But what we're really talking about is changing the way those emissions are then managed. Now, your site talks about the need to sequester unavoidable CO2, and that would be, for instance, air travel, at least until we replace it with a truly carbon neutral fuel. Do you see companies beginning to integrate carbon capture into their planning? Are they thinking about when they're building like a new manufacturing site, are they thinking about managing the CO2 coming out of that using carbon capture technology?
We see that not only from producing industries, but also from industries like insurances and so on. What you said before, this moral hazard topic, right. Of course, in theory, this could be a threat. I mean, in practical life, normally when you start to think sustainably, then in a first step you're implementing measures where you're actually saving money. And then as a next measures, you're implementing measures which are cheap. So you're basically working you up the abatement cost curve of carbon dioxide. And what we are doing is at the very end. So these technical solutions are there because there are no other solutions able to make the entire job. And we need to have an entire portfolio. But point number one is reduce your emissions. Carbon dioxide removal from the air is not an excuse to not to do your job. And also, I mean, a simple price tag gives you the answer. I mean, you mentioned our web shop, and the costs we have in the moment for carbon dioxide removal are not giving you an excuse not to stop emitting.
Now, you talked about a portfolio of solutions. Why aren't just planting trees and other natural projects, such as seaborne sequestration, enough to remove the CO2 that's sitting out there from the last 170 years of industrial activity?
It's a simple question of efficiency. I mean, plants are doing a great job, but you cannot plant enough trees to make the job. Technical solutions, they are much more efficient in terms of land use, or in terms of also of the use of other resources like water and things like that. And that's why you need something more than just planting trees. That's the simple answer.
Okay, and you know, we've looked at this too, and if you were just to rely on even planting 1 trillion more trees, you're talking about dozens and dozens of years to take that residual CO2 out of the atmosphere. So yep. Generally agree with that. Now, tell me about the Pioneer and the other subscription programs for Climeworks. I've signed up, so I'm paying to remove some CO2 every month. The question is, what would it cost the average American right now to sequester their carbon footprint using a Climeworks program? What
this Pioneer program we have developed because many people approached us and said, hey, we would like to be a part of this mission. How can we support? And that's how we created that. And it's also meant to be a mission support. So every pioneer has his or her own story why she or he subscribed. And this is what we like in this program. If you would like to, as an average American, if you would like to remove your entire carbon emissions of a year, it would cost you around $15,000. We do have, not many, but we do have pioneers who are paying that. But most of the people, they're supporting us with an amount, as you mentioned, $8, $25, $55. what they are willing to contribute and what they can make their own story around that. And this is what we like, this community approach to do it together and to tackle this challenge as a community and not just as a single fighter.
So, and this collective project to remove the CO2 is a great way to kickstart this industry. And we've talked about all the different ways that you can begin to move into the management of the CO2 cycle. Do you anticipate being able to operate profitably based on the price, a price being put on a ton of carbon, which, for instance, if President Biden's proposal of $51 a ton were to be put in place as a carbon tax or a price for carbon used to calculate an offset, can you be profitable at that level, or does it need to be higher, or can it be lower?
$51 per ton is not enough.
Okay.
We need to have it higher. We need to have a price on carbon something between $100 and $200 per ton. But
Okay.
you cannot go from today to tomorrow on such a level. So we need to do it stepwise. And also we need to reduce the emissions and gradually increase the price on carbon. And this vision of $100 to $200 we need to implement in the next 10 years. So $51 per ton is a very good start. And I believe that President Biden did a very strong move there to address that, and also to show that carbon emissions need to have a price tag. And from this perspective, I believe this is a very strong signal.
So between $100 and $200 a ton suggests things are going to be more expensive. And for example, I would point to the price of a hamburger in Northern Europe. It's $12 to $15. It does price in the cost of the carbon. Do you anticipate inflation in the cost of a lot of different things, or does the fact that an organization like Climeworks can also bring a profit back out, net out to a lower overall cost for things that emit carbon for consumers?
I mean, we need to reduce our emissions, and that also reduces the emissions you need to price on. That's point number one. That's also an economical rationale behind.
Sure.
And the second thing is that we need to look at the both sides of the equation. And of course, it will cost something to avoid or to remove the emissions, but on the other hand, it will cost much more not to do it. Right. So the damage we're going to have in the future, if you're not doing that, they will be much higher. And from this perspective, it's an economical rationale to remove your emissions and not just to leave it out in the atmosphere.
So how do you see Climeworks growing over the course of the next 5 to 10 years? Or do you see 10x the number of installations you have now, more? And how fast can you get to a point where you are, say, removing approximately 5% of the historic CO2?
So we see the direct air capture industry on a level of a couple of million tons installed capacity per year by 2030. Climeworks definitely will also be on this level by that. So we see a growth of a factor of something between 100 and 1,000 in the next coming years, which also seems to be reasonable. I mean, we also need to be clear that the 4,000 tons here today is not on a very high level yet. This is definitely the way we need to go. When we talk about 5% of the emissions, this is quite a bit. So we are talking about 40 gigatons, 40 billion tons of removals every year. So 5% is around 1 billion ton of carbon dioxide every year. So we believe that there's another 10 years or so needed to be on a level like that.
As you think about the evolution of the pricing of carbon, then do you anticipate that consumer products will begin to factor in the cost and even surface that cost to the consumer? I know this is a little beyond the scope of what you guys are doing on a day-to-day basis, but it does lead, it has to do with how we are all going to understand what we are doing and spending money on together. Do you anticipate a carbon cost is potentially being added to the sales receipt in the future?
Probably it will be a mix. I mean, we see this, for example, in Switzerland, there will be a fee on flight tickets. And
Okay.
there it is anticipated that a part of the fee needs to be paid by the passenger, and the other part of the fee will be paid by the airline, because you simply cannot push all the additional costs to the consumer. But at the end of the day, it's there will be the society which needs to pay that. But on the other side, if you're not doing it, also the society is going to pay. So the society has additional costs, but it also gets the benefits. And I believe this is a fair way to do it.
How many people do you anticipate being employed in the carbon capture industry, say a decade from now? Is it going to be many multiples of today, and will it be bigger than the oil industry?
If you're going to scale the direct air capture industry to a level where we need to have it, then of course it will be a major industry comparable to oil and gas today, yes. In 10 years, we need to have significant growth, so it will create, we need to create thousands of jobs, and that's also what we see today. I mean, Climeworks is growing some 30% every year, and this is definitely also a growth rate we need to maintain over the next years, and this definitely also creates jobs, yes.
So how can our listeners get started doing offsets, and where would you suggest they start, and to make the right impact?
I mean, what you definitely need to start is on your own behavior. So you need to rethink what you're doing, and also what is worth. I'm not the one telling you're not allowed to emit anything. I mean,
Sure.
You also need to have fun in your life. That's for sure. But you need to rethink what you're doing, and you need to be aware of your impact, and then start to remove your own emissions.
Mm-hmm.
Climeworks is one way to do it, of course, and that's what you said before. But also others. When I'm at the gas station, then I'm offsetting my emissions. That should be something normal. That we are starting to take responsibility for our emissions, and that this you can do in your daily life.
It'd be great if you guys made an app that helped calculate that. I bought some gas. How much do I need to offset? We don't really. It's the calculators out there are not quite up to snuff yet, I got to say.
That's true. I mean, carbon calculators. This is a tricky business, and the calculators out there are not on the level we would like to have it. But also there we see quite some good progress, and I hope that we're also going to integrate this soon on our website.
Well, I encourage everybody to check out your website. Daniel, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thanks to you.
Well, thank you to Daniel Eggers, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Climeworks. They're based in Zurich, Switzerland, and you can check them out at climeworks.com. Go to climeworks.com/subscriptions to buy your own carbon sequestration credits. And we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, could you share sustainability in your ear with one or two of your friends? Let's get the word out there. This is an important campaign to change the way we think about the future, as Daniel was just saying. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911 Sustainability in Your Ear, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Thanks very much.